Hi, I'm Charlie the Spaniard Brenneman, former UFC fighter, current speaker, author, and podcaster, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
This is cool, man. We get to have a lot of interesting people on the show. Our show is not about fighting, but we've had, let's see, a fighter who won Fight of the Year twice in boxing and won the championship several times. We've had Tito Ortiz on the show. We've had Frank Shamrock was on the show, and Don Fry have all been on the show. And so you're joining a very powerful dojo.
I'll take that. I'll take that crowd any day. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All of you, well, I guess maybe not so much necessarily Tito, but Tito has passed his big fight days. All of you guys have transitioned away from the fight game and into other businesses. How did you think you were going to approach it back when you were fighting?
The transition out, you mean?
Yeah.
You know, so I transitioned I used to be a junior high Spanish teacher, and then I transitioned into professional fighting. So I don't know. I didn't put much thought into it, and I'll explain when I started thinking about it, but I was just cruising along. I had left my profession of teaching, gotten into fighting. I was there. I enjoyed it. It was a life. I didn't really think of post-fighting life. I wasn't really at the spot of thinking about it. And then back in, 2014, I got re-signed to the UFC on short notice. I lost the fight in January. Then I fought again in April. All signs were, to me, I thought I was going to win that fight. I got knocked out cold. First time ever out cold. And at that point, I was like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Well, the punch hit me like a ton of bricks, but then the experience, I started thinking about like, whoa, what's my out? Like, what's my brain? I've never thought about this before. And at that point, I really started to consider it. And then I just assessed what I'm good at, what I like to do, where there were possibilities, and then really just objectively went in that direction.
Yeah. So no thought to go back to teaching though, like you had left that in the past.
Correct. So one of the reasons the reason I started fighting is I like freedom. I like not constraints. I like being unconstrained. And I love discipline. I love hard work. I love that stuff if it's channeled in the right direction. And for me, being in the classroom is not where I wanted to be then. It's not where I want to be now. Maybe in the future, but I'm still teaching by way of my show, by way of my speaking. I'm consuming. It's funny. I would never want to do my doctorate, but yeah. I've read more books than people who have how many ever doctorates. Yeah. Like I love learning, but what I want to learn. So no desire to go back into the classroom.
Right. When you're in the fight game, and I know like there's a lot of ego and there's confidence because there has to be so that you can do it. Yeah. But the top is super pointy, where, okay, you can get on a fight card, but you don't make a whole lot of money doing that. And if you're going to be climbing the fight card, you have to only do that. So when did you as a fighter realize that I am a professional fighter, but my chances to really make a lot of money are limited?
I never really thought that, to be honest, and maybe that's naive. It wasn't ego, but you're right. I don't know if we'll circle back to ego or not, but yeah, that's a huge thing. Before I kind of answer the question you asked, I'll touch on that real quick. It's one of the weirdest parts for me coming out of fighting is the directness, the black and whiteness of fighting, and the kind of like, I'll say crude, but I mean in your face, like basically I'm going to kick your butt, period. Oh yeah. Well, let's fight. Okay. That doesn't work in life. It's not that way in life at all. Yeah. So it's really, I mean, it sounds odd, but it's just I just got conditioned to think that, and you just fight people and you train, and then you fight people and then you train. And I've had to decondition myself from that. And I'm not a crazy person. I'm not a violent person, but it's still, no, there's like etiquette, and there's like, you don't just say what you're thinking. There's ways of saying it properly and more tactful. Yeah. But in reference to your question, I never really thought that. Maybe that's naivety. Maybe that's the ego, the belief that you need to have in yourself. But man, I thought I was going for gold. I thought I was a fight away from a $1 million fight, like every fight. And I think kind of you have to think that, or I'm not going to say you have to think that, but you don't really think the alternative.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, the alternative presents itself one way or the other. Like you always, like your game always finds its level. And usually it's your, a lot of sports, like if your intensity and desire wane, your talent is instantly not enough. And I imagine that's the same thing in the fight game.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good follow up and or drives the point home. As soon as you start thinking I'm a middle of the road guy, I think I'll stay here in the middle. It's like, is it really what I want to do? And I mean, I made the conscious decision, or I was constantly aware, like, this is fighting. I'm dealing with my brain, I'm dealing with my future. I had a daughter then. I have a family. I don't want to be half in.
Right.
And I didn't it wasn't an active realization, but when I got knocked out and I started to consider when I was sparring, ooh, my brain, ooh, my brain, ooh, my brain. I feel like that was kind of the beginning of, I've either got to leave the sport or I've got to like stop this line of thinking.
Yeah. And then are you the kind of guy that has to completely give it up? Like, I can't touch a heavy bag, I can't put on gloves, or do you continue to train in your own new way?
It's a really interesting question. I did not discard of it because it's like too much for me. I can't hit the bag because then I want to fight. I don't feel that way. I don't have a desire to fight right now. There's, I just don't have a desire. If there were an opportunity, I don't know, but I just don't want to. More so, it's the practical kind of the schedule logistics of why I don't fight train. I train like a madman in the gym, strength and conditioning, but I don't train jujitsu. I don't wrestle. I don't hit the heavy bag simply because at this point in my life with priorities, those are just not a priorities. I love intensity. I love the reward I get from training in terms of sprints and push-ups and all that stuff. But I don't really feel that way for fighting. Like, I learned those skills because I wanted to fight. I would gladly do jujitsu if it was 5 minutes from my house and there were a load of black belts, but it's not. And right now I can't spend an hour traveling for that.
And you're at the point where you don't, it's like being excellent at volleyball and not wanting to play picnic volleyball because it just drives you crazy.
Perfect.
Jiu-jitsu, I imagine.
I got spoiled. It's like, holy cow, when you're around, I mean, literal legends of the sport on a regular basis, and then you're not, then it's like, man, I want to do it. Like, I could be home with my kids, or I could be watching Netflix, or I could be doing something. I definitely got spoiled to the point where I thought every day was like that everywhere. And it's just not. So that also plays a role in it as well. Yeah.
When we had Tony the Tiger Lopez on, he's just a hell of a fighter. But, he's in his 50s now, and he looks like your Mexican grandpa. But he's like, the other day, because we asked him, like, about like how close he ever gets to fighting in general. And he's like, sometimes someone will get a little lippy in a nightclub or a bar or whatever. And I'm not in them often, but I'm not going to back out from that. So it's like, it's like, I'm not going to start nothing, but I'll let him know, like, I'm pretty fast,
Yeah.
And if you ever look at, and fighters, if you ever look at his hands, he has those fighter hands where you're like, I wouldn't want to butt my arm against that hand because it's just, it's all bone and they're huge. He's got huge hammers, for hands.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I feel like most fighters kind of walk around with, I mean, I look, when you train every day and you train with killers every day, you wake up and you're like, oh, I gotta go fight people. I gotta go wrestle. I gotta go choked out, beat up, blah, blah, blah. It's just like you're conditioned to just, it's almost like, like you're walking around like someone's coming at you, like you're looking all around. That's how it kind of was. So, I mean, even today, the reason I train strength conditioning the way I do is because I want to be able to beat you up. If someone attacks me, I want to be able to take them out. I don't want to get tired. And so I constantly walk around. I don't know if that's healthy or not, but I liked the competence that I felt when I was fighting, and the conditioning that I was in, and the mindset and mentality. And I want to carry that with me every day. It's like you used to have a weapon, and then if you don't have that weapon, you'll feel kind of naked. I liked that physical and mental confidence that I had from training. And so at least in the strength and conditioning, I keep up that end of the bargain.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a go-to move? Like if someone was to come after you and you're not trying to, destroy them, but they just decide that you're the guy they're going to fight. Do you have a go-to thing that just makes them not want to fight anymore? Like my buddy Brian's a huge man. He's 6'4", he's 262. And it doesn't matter what he does. He's just enormous. He just picks people up and he shakes them until they want to stop fighting. He doesn't get into fights anymore, but he's a guy that people always looked at and said, that's the guy I want to fight. He's the biggest guy in the room. And then he would shake them until they didn't want to fight anymore.
Yeah. For me, naturally, I would just resort to wrestling. First of all, it's amazing how much lack of ability people have in fighting if they're not trained fighters. Like it's crazy. I just assume that people know how to fight and control their body, and really they don't. So without a doubt, I would shoot a double, probably take their back, either incapacitate them or start to choke them, and then that would hopefully ease in the situation. But another thing that I've like told, I don't know if it's been seminars or what, but nobody would ever, if someone's talking smack to you and you hit them with a solid leg kick right in the thigh, they would fall on the ground and want nothing to do with you, because that's one of the most painful things you can do, is just leg kick someone. It's not violent. You're not knocking them out. I mean, it hurts. It's not like you're knocking them out. It's just a solid leg kick. It would be one of those things where they just like backed up and thought, I don't want any more of that.
Reset.
Yes.
Exactly. I've taught my daughter to go for the eyeball and go all the way to the back of it and try to yank that motherfucker out, because no one, it doesn't matter how big you are, wants some thumb in their eye. You know what I mean? When I mean in their eye, I mean back of the skull.
In their eye.
You know?
That'll stop anybody.
They all will reassess. And if they do come back, one eye left, you know? And
exactly.
Then
such a pleasant line of thought, you know?
Yeah. And obviously that's self-defense, like the base level. Like someone gets on you, just jam your thumb in there. You may get one crack at it, but that probably will be enough to make them at least take one hand out of the fight. Anyhow.
Absolutely.
One of the things we do around here is we don't put the Letterman jacket on too long, but I wanted to just kind of get into some of that interesting MMA stuff. But really what's more interesting to me about you is where you're at now and how you redefine these things, especially with all this COVID craziness going on. What we all thought we were doing 2 months ago is now, you know, we're not doing it, and we never do it again.
Yeah. So that hit me like a ton of bricks, as it, you know, most everyone, it hit like a ton of bricks. So I, you know, if I had to condense it into one simple statement, it's very hard to do, but basically I take the lessons that I've lived by, which come from wrestling and fighting, and I apply them to daily life and basically teach those lessons. And when I stopped fighting, I was not around world class anymore. I moved back home to Pennsylvania. I'm just not, I'm not in those gyms anymore. And so I really took to reading books as my own form of being around the best and my own fuel. And then slowly I started kind of transferring what I was learning outward to other people. So it was like my own personal development and then putting it out. So my podcast, The Spaniard Show, I read books and I teach the lessons in the books. And, you know, a lot of my money came from speaking in schools. Most of it was come from speaking in schools and then businesses as well. And, you know, there's some virtual programs that you can do right now, but at least for the first, I don't know, 4 or 6 weeks, especially in education, nobody knew, and they didn't know what they were allowed to do and not allowed to do. So they certainly weren't going to spend any money or even any thought to bringing in a speaker. Right. So It's starting to buff out now a little bit. But so when that hit, I had to figure out how to move forward. So the last 2 months for me have been extreme introspection, reflection, business development, thought exploration, idea generation, putting that stuff into action. So it's been a lot.
What have you come up with?
Well, so, and this is good for anyone because we get knocked out or whatever in a variety of ways. So for me, it became, okay, not going into school. So right away there was like 10 grand that was just not going to happen, period.
Right.
So then I thought, okay, well, how can I make a living? What can I do to make a living? So for me, the last 2 months has really been diving into my show, my podcast, and figuring out how to create, you know, a membership or e-learning information products. So I've been really diving into marketing books, business marketing books, talking about, you know, what market, what email systems, website, marketing consultants. Like it's all been that. I started running a mastermind group. I recorded an audio book of my first book, Driven, My Unlikely Journey from Classroom to Cage, as a lead generator. Really, those are some of the things I've been doing. I think I've read 6 or 7 business books in the last 6 or 7 weeks. So it's, you know, been on overdrive and it's still buffing out. I'm figuring out what's working. I'm also putting out a training program. There's a lot of people that want to walk around with the confidence of a professional fighter. And I've been logging my workouts for the last 2 years. So I'm putting that into practice. So those are some of them.
That's a lot. And that redefinition is going to continue ultimately until you figure it out. Like you do this for a while, then you do that for a while. And we're all sort of trying to figure out how to do what it is that we do. And as we get older, we know a whole lot more of what we don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
The things like, I'm not going back into the classroom or whatever that is. What are some areas where you're like, this would be interesting to get into, like where you haven't been there before and it's a place you would like to explore?
I'll tell you what, okay. So anyone that has any sort of business, it's being told no, being rejected. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable, but there are people out there who want what you have to offer, right? If you have a thing that's of value, there are people. So I figure using my podcast as the driver of recruiting people who buy into what I'm talking about, this fighter mindset life, right? Mm-hmm. Mental and physical. Those are the people that I want to interact with most. So one of the new things I've landed on is training. So I love health and fitness. I love training. I'm a student of it. I practice it as much as I learn about it. I have a lot of kind of role models and mentors that I know and that are distant on Instagram. And I'm always learning new skills with kettlebells, with body weight, with standard lifting. And I want to get into it because I look at what's there and I like a lot of what's there, but I just feel like it could be, and I'm totally, I mean, this is not proven. This is an idea. Like I want to simplify it and I want to provide it in a very simple way. And I also want to personalize it by way of small group sessions. And so I'm interested in seeing if this idea has legs and if it'll work. And I have about 20 people who are saying, yeah, I'm interested in it. And so that's enough for me to say, okay, let's try it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You don't seem to have a lot of fear with what's next. You seem to have ideas.
Yeah, you're right. Because when someone's coming at you, you have to fight, right? When they shut the door and they say, ready, fight, you got to fight. Yeah. I was going to say earlier, there is a danger to trying so much because you don't want to be like, oh, that's that guy trying that thing again. Like, holy cow. Like you're just trying, like just with the wind, you're trying stuff. But at the same time, how are you going to know if it's going to work? And I've looked really dumb before. I've got knocked out cold on TV. And so if I try a workout program and it doesn't work in a week or 2 weeks, people aren't even going to remember it. Yeah. But I have to figure out a way. So trying is the way you figure it out.
Yeah, that fear, it's a question I get. I've got a lot of combat time and they're like, aren't you afraid? And my typical answer is the time for afraid. I mean, you're aware of the danger, but the time for being afraid is long past when you're stepping out on a patrol or whatever it is. And I got to imagine like you've got a job to do at some point and the job takes over. Like I have these 125 things to do before I step into the ring. And I've only got 3 hours to get them done. Like you've got all these things. There's just no time for fear, at least from my point of view.
I agree 100%. Preparation. So actually you just reminded me, one of the biggest things that I've done is I created, it's a course. It's an introductory course. And I'm still learning like, okay, where am I going to host it? How am I going to sell it and promote it? But it's a 10 video series on overcoming fear. Yeah. And I landed on that topic by reading a book called Choose that like walks you through this process. But that's one of the big things I'm doing too. And in that, I talk about preparation being like an antidote to fear and that preparation being physical and mental. And it goes back to like how you prepared for it. And it's like the fear that you're carrying, you can't just say, don't be afraid. It's impossible. You can't. Don't be afraid. Okay, well, that's easy, right? But I just feel like the preparation and the work and the job, the task at hand, it just displaces that fear with action. And look, I'm not a natural born fighter. I have a chip on my shoulder, but actual fist fighting, I'm not drawn to it. I'm kind of repelled away from it. But when you learn every day, you just learn every day. You go through the reps, go through the reps, go through the reps, go through the reps. And then someone comes at you, you fight because that's your practice. That's your preparation. I talk to a lot of military folks and it's like, you train and you train and you train and you train. Being in your first firefight, like, again, I'm speaking from listening to, talking to, reading about, you can't really know what it's like until you're there. And then when you're there, it's boom, you do what you're trained to do. And it's the fear is like not then, the fear is either before or non-existent.
Let's push that even further then, because you're right, the training, and you get in your first firefight and you realize, okay, that happened. A lot of times it happens so fast. And this has got to be the same thing in fighting, where you're like, look at all the things that I missed just because my brain is just receiving so much new stuff. I remember the first time for me when combat slowed down, and it wasn't that time was slower. It was just that I knew what my job was in these specific moments, and the outcome external to me was really secondary because I have these things to do. And if you get shot, then you get shot and you worry about that. But that's not a problem in that instant. And if you worry about getting shot all the time, you're frozen by fear again. And so for me, combat slowed down to where I'm like, we need to get from here to there. We should walk. You should run to that point. Take cover. And it became a linear path that was navigable. Life is like that a lot of times, right? Where COVID-19 comes washing in, and it's just so much. We're all overwhelmed, and we're trying to act or react or freeze and figure out what's going on. We don't know what to do. How does one deal with that? You can't prepare for adversity like COVID-19. You just can't, because you don't know what's coming, so you can't be ready for it.
I think that so there's a book called The Happiness Hypothesis, and it's an awesome book. It's by a guy named Jonathan Haidt. And it's just, the whole book is about psychology of happiness, practice of happiness. And I don't know if it's called the adaptation. I think it's the adaptation principle, meaning that as human beings, we adapt. Okay. When COVID started, this home quarantine, home order, stay at home order, it was the craziest thing in the world. It's like that day, you literally, is this real life? Is this real life? I can't believe it's still crazy now. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I forget that we're in this quarantine. Like, it's just my life now. It's my life. We've adapted to it. When you're in battle like that, or when you're in a fight like I am, it's kind of like the crazy, you just adapt, and the craziness kind of goes away, because the more you do it, the less crazy it gets. And the norm is, they talk about the adaptation principle. If you make a lot of money, well, eventually that lot of money is just going to be your money. It's not a lot of money anymore, because you've adapted to it. And it's like that across the board with anything. The stuff that's going on now in life is so freaking crazy. And so, is it real? Is this real? Is this happening for real? But little by little by little by little, it just becomes, it's a new reality. It's the new life. When you go out and you see people wearing those face masks, I literally every single time have to say to myself, is this real life? And then you do what you do, and then you're like, yeah, it's real life.
Real life. This is really happening. And then to not be bound by fear with all of this stuff, to go, this is real life. Let's get moving towards something, even if it's not the right thing, if it's right in that moment, and then you respond from there. I suppose that's better than waiting for it to go back to normal.
Yeah, I have and I certainly am far from an expert on everything that's going on, but I know that for me, controlling the controllables is, it always puts me at as much ease as possible. So my wife, for example, is a lot more worried about everything that's going on, a lot more into it, a lot more in tune with the news and the latest update, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My philosophy in everything I do is get an understanding, an appropriate level, a base level of understanding, and then control everything that I can control. And then what happens, right? So what are the rules? What are the regulations? How can I prepare myself? Okay, I'm going to do all that. And then you live. Same thing with a fight. You don't know what's going to happen in a fight, but you prepare, you control the controllables, your diet, your nutrition, your rest, your training, your strength, all of that. And then you step in the ring and, okay, my fate is my fate. Especially with COVID, we control what we can control, and then you decide, how will I live from there? Some people will never come out of the fear of everything. Some people are probably being careless about it, and then some people are probably of the mindset where, hey, I'm doing what I can do. I'm alive. I've got to live, and I'll live.
What are your thoughts on the folks that are saying, "Hey, it's time to get moving. I'm not here. I can't afford to do nothing. I have, things that we all can't afford to do nothing, right?"
Yeah.
But the folks that need to go forward and need just by nature to move and go and fight on their own and accept the consequences, are they being unfair, or are we being unfair to them by holding them to a standard that they're not? It's not attainable for them.
Man, that's so complex. I think, well, I don't know where I read it or whatever, but is the cure worse than the disease? I think
Right.
that's a really important thing for people smarter than me to think about. But I just can't fathom how everything does not implode. I
Mhm.
cannot imagine a situation in which everything does not implode. If you just drive down the street or you drive past a shopping center, none of that rent is being paid. None of that inventory is being sold. None of that. And it can't work it can't work that way. And
Mhm.
I don't know how it does work, but I am feeling like, all right, like what's the outcome here? Are we just going to not live forever? Are we like, what's the outcome here? So I'm surprised there's not been more kind of uprising and instability because of
Yeah.
more and more people wanting to get out there. But then the drawback to that, or well, I do get the fact that it's not just about you, it's about the
Right.
other people involved.
Yeah.
And that's like a whole other thing. So I don't know that there's a right answer, but I certainly don't hate on anyone for feeling anyway, really.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm action oriented. I want to go and do things. Normally, the podcast is I wouldn't say most time, but I'd say 50-50. We'll do it like this, but the other 50, I'm there. I'm in their space. I'm in their dojo. That's why I always say I'm in their dojo, in their world, because there's a different encounter like that. And
Mhm.
that's what I did as a spy. I mean, I went out to people's place and I talked to them, and it's a little hard for a guy that gets out on the road quite a bit to change that thing, but here I am. I'm doing it, as
Yeah.
best I can.
And I think another thing to think about is like it'll buff out.
Mm,
Everything that's supposed to stick will stick, and everything that's not supposed to stick won't stick. I found myself saying, like, oh my gosh, I hope it's not this way. So, for example, shaking hands or wearing
mhm,
masks, like there's a potential play that we wear masks everywhere all the time. I don't want that,
mhm,
right?
yeah,
I want to shake people's hands. I want to hug people. And I find myself saying, like, oh, I hope it's not. I hope it is. And then it's like, you know what? Just like we were talking about with fighting and it is what it is. I'm in this life in 2020. This is the reality. So whatever the reality is,
yeah,
what is it? The people make out the best, whatever it is that people making the best of the way things turn out. Like you'll thrive when you become okay with the way it is. And you can't control, that's a non-controllable. I can't control any of that stuff. So control what you can control.
is it easy to recognize when you thrive, though, or is thriving a state of perpetual, like you always chase it, like nirvana?
I don't think thriving is a static state. I think of this all the time. It's actually a good prompt there. So I talk a lot about mindset, mental toughness, discipline, consistency, pursuit. And I realize I used to have the perspective of if you're going to teach me about X, then you need to be the world champion in X, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to teach me how to fight, you better be world champion. And then I realized like it's not that way. Some of the best wrestling coaches I know weren't even close to the best wrestler. And I
Mhm.
think about that often with the things that I teach about and talk about. And it's not that I'm like super duper qualified. It's that I just am super duper working hard in that area. So it's not like, I've reached a point of mastery. It's no, I'm a master in trying to reach that point of mastery. And so when you learn about all this stuff, it allows you to know about it. Of course, to have any sort of credibility, you need to be actually working toward that point. You know, if I talk about discipline and mental toughness and I'm just totally weakened on discipline, it means nothing. But no, I don't think that mastery. I don't think people who write books on accountability, books on leadership, books on family relationships, run father podcasts, they're not perfect at any of that stuff, but they're like perfect at trying to be perfect at that stuff.
Yeah, it occurred to me a while back, and I'm not sure how to apply this in life necessarily, but there is, like, you're doing a podcast is a good example of this. When you publish something, you get a chance to set the bar. You know, maybe someone can go over your bar and they're better at it and more successful at it. But like Rolling Stone set like the bar. They said, here are the 500 greatest albums ever. You all talk off of their topic, you know. So as we create things, we're setting a bar and they're saying, here's what you have to do to get over the bar, you know. And there's an interesting dynamic with that. By just simply acting, you're actually doing the thing that you're talking about to everybody else, and creating that opportunity for someone to say, this is what prepared looks like. This is what thriving looks like. This is what mindful looks like. But you have to create that standard first.
Yeah. And then the accountable part, the accountability part is you have to continue to live it, or your fraudness or whatever, it's like you'll be made and then it won't work anymore. You know, my show, it's about the disciplined practice of learning. So as soon as I stop doing that, then what's a guy talking about disciplined pursuit of learning who doesn't discipline learn? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So eventually it's like your time will run out and you'll be made. But yeah.
So as you go through these books and you're learning, what kind of books are you reading, and who do you always go back to, whether it's a new book or an old book that you just continue to pull nuggets out of?
Yeah. So a neat thing. So actually we're recording this a couple of days prior to, on my podcast, I've had about 1,500 episodes, and 1,000 of them have been daily episodes where I talk about the lessons in the book. So I've covered a couple hundred books and coming up on 1,000 of that type of episode. I read biographies and autobiographies just about successful people, anyone from Milton Hershey to Mr. Rogers to any business owner. I have, you know, whatever. I also love to read about like kind of psychology books, kind of happiness and thought. Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert.
Sure.
He's a really, really good author. I really enjoy his books. Jocko Willink, his leadership books, I love them. His kids' books, I love them. I read picture books, like literal picture books for kids. Take 5 minutes to read. Brad Meltzer is a great picture book author that I go back to. And what happens is, like, I've been doing this for so long, and I have like a system where I take notes and then I create my 8-minute episode based on those notes. And it's like a Moleskine journal entry. And what happens is it's just practice and reps, so that when I talk, and I don't know if I've done it throughout this conversation or what, but stuff just pops into your head that you recite. Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. I reference his book all the time. Stuff just sticks with you. It becomes a fabric, just like training, punches, kicks, etc. It becomes part of your fabric. I love reading about Native Americans, Native American history. I enjoy learning about, I created like a little module course, but learning about the wrong things, meaning things that religion, evolutionary biology, psychedelics, things that you're set in how you feel. And then you read books and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that wrong thing, I don't know if it's wrong anymore. Like, that person made a lot of sense. So it just tests yourself and helps you eventually land on this is what I believe.
One of the things I've learned as I've gotten older and more tolerant of miscomfort, and I call it miscomfort because it's a comfort that you don't know. It's not that it's uncomfortable. It's just, you know, like if you only knew cold showers and you got into a hot shower, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on? You know?
Yeah.
So the idea, I kind of lost my point, my train of thought there.
Learning about the wrong things, miscomfort of learning new things.
Right. So as you approach these different learning lessons, you want to go after, or podcast episodes, for example, I want to go after things that make me uncomfortable. because that's where the growth is. You know, it's like, I don't necessarily want to have OJ Simpson on the show, but that's the kind of miscomfort I'm looking for. Like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know if I can handle that. And like, I don't know if I need to do that, but I'm looking for that kind of like, where is this like scary, you know?
I agree. And it's interesting because I've said that to my wife, and I think, and there are some people who would say, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Why would you ever want that? Whereas I look at it like you do, like, that's going to hurt. I kind of want to do that. Yeah. Why? I don't know. I just want to test myself. And with learning about, especially psychedelics, like, I've never done drugs. I don't plan to do drugs. And there's, you know, CBD is kind of basically mainstream now. I don't think it'll be within, I don't know, it won't be too long until psychedelics, they're already in the conversation, but become maybe like CBD. And I would have thought that was crazy, because everyone just thinks like LSD and tripping, and that's whatever. And then you read the book, How to Change Your Mind. And then, you know, one of my buddies, Kyle Kingsbury, who works at On It, he's my friend. I like him. I trust him. I learned my other friend I have, Riley Cote, who used to be an enforcer for the Philadelphia Flyers. You talk to these people and you're like, whoa, you're just like me. And you think this thing about a thing that I used to say was the devil.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the devil. Maybe it's okay for you to think that and me to think this. And okay. Like, it stretches you and grows you as a person. Empathy, respect, perspective, all benefits of reading.
Yeah, reading's powerful. So when you read a book, do you tend to go through a book more than once?
So what I do is, my show is, I have a couple of different branches of my show. One is a kids branch, one is a books branch, and one is a interviews. So with the books, which is the primary, the most content, I'll read upstairs or wherever I'll read, and I'll have a pen, and I read the hard copy, and I'm taking notes, and I have different notes I'll take for different reasons. And so I'll read it once, and then when I prep the episode, I go back and let's say I'll take 20 or 30 pages, something like that. Yeah. And I'll, scour through it again. So that's basically 2 times that I'm at least covering the material, and then putting it into my notebook and then producing the show. So that's like 3 to 4 levels of actual ingraining into my fabric. And I read a book with the intent to teach the book. And I think that's a strategy for people if they want to be better readers and retain it, is think, hey, I've got to teach this book. How am I going to teach it? And so the notes that I take, the little like personal cues to me, like if you looked at my notebook, you'd be like, what the heck does that mean? But I know what it means, and it's going to prompt me to say something. And if you do that hundreds of times, it starts to just become you.
Have you read Jim Mattis's book, Call Sign Chaos?
I have not, but
it's excellent. It's well, everybody should buy it, first of all. But yeah, just because he was a leader at every single level, you can be a leader, except for maybe vice president, president. He provides the context for leading at each level, and just how he learned and challenged himself and made mistakes along the way. And it's one of those books where I think, gosh, I could go through that 5 more times and get more things in. Like, one of the things he talks about is like, when you read the words of people from the past, warriors in his case, they're telling you the most important thing that they took time to write down. Like, we should really pay attention if you're in that business, Like if Frank Shamrock writes a book and he's writing about fighting, if you're going to be a fighter, you need to listen to this guy, because he's giving you all this. Like, he's not holding anything back. Like, you're trying to sell a book. You're putting your absolute best stuff in it. Make sure you read the damn thing.
When I started fighting, I read all those books. Like, I have 10 or 15 of them right here. I wanted to be those guys, so I read their books and learned what I could about them. I was going to say, reading the books, going back to the books. One of the things that I also do, so if someone's like, there's a lot of people who want to be a certain way and then don't be that way. Like, I wish I exercised. I wish I drank water. I wish I didn't drink, blah, blah, blah. Some people say, I wish I could read more, right? Because they see people doing it who are exemplifying the benefits of it. One of the things I would recommend is getting picture books, like literal picture books that are written for 3 to 6-year-olds or 5 to 8-year-olds. I've read, so whenever I do talks, you asked if I go back to books. Whenever I do talks at schools or businesses, I'll bring a handful of books with me and use some of those books to drive home the points that I'm talking about. So I often revisit books and bring them with me and open them and scour through them. But I realized like picture books, I didn't know this when I was a kid. Probably kids don't know this. You know, you read these picture books, your parents read to you, you read these middle school books Where the Red Fern Grows. You don't realize, oh, these are grown-up life lessons packaged to me, a kid. So when I'm reading these picture books, I'm literally thinking, this is the same lesson that I read in Jocko's leadership book. It's just packaged differently. So if you want to learn from books grown up and you don't want to put in the time to read it, just get picture books and read the picture books.
I've taken to, just because it's hard for me to sit still and dig into a book and really stay focused, like I need to read it. I've taken to audiobooks, which are, for me, I can listen at a faster pace because I don't read at a slow pace. I read fast, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm able to get these books more reliably, but also mark things almost as effectively as with the pen. I really enjoy it. And then, you know, take time to go through different sections again too, because there's really something that matters. And you're right. I have this catalog of stuff in the back of my head that I can go, I read that in this book. I read that in this book, you know, and you start to realize these lessons are all around you.
It's like I've heard and seen, like, there's nothing new. You know, there's nothing new. You're not creating anything. Everything's always been created. That's the truth in books. Like, you'll hear, wait a minute, I read that in that book over there. And it's just, there's maybe 1,000 things as a human you should learn. And those 1,000 things are dispersed across time, books, wisdom, etc. Question with the Audible, how do you mark them? Because that's the reason I don't listen to Audible, because I'm like a fiend when it comes to underlining.
There's a way to mark in there, you know, but also I typically will take my phone and I will give myself a note, because if I put it in the book, I tend to not go back to it. So I use my phone to make a note, like, you know, 28 minutes, whatever seconds. I know there's a note there, and then I go back and I listen to that section. I actually do that. There's probably a better way inside of Audible, but I primarily use the phone.
And you do that with you make an audio to yourself, or you type it in like a notes or something?
It depends on where I'm at, but primarily I don't want to be a long time because I'm in the book. So I make a time marker, you know, and then maybe a word to remind me what's there. But when I go back, I instantly hear it. I'm like, oh, that's why I made this note there.
Yeah.
You know,
I may actually try that technique. It's like the uncomfortable things. I don't listen to audiobooks because I'm like obsessive and I need it in front of me, but I feel like, well, maybe I should learn to do what he's talking about, because that'll be another skill set. So it's not out of the question that I do just sit down with a pen and listen and put down that timestamp or whatever it is, and then go back.
Well, and also, like, you can do it while you're vacuuming. You know, you can do something nice around the house, and you're like, oh, I could be reading. Why don't I just do both? And so it's not as good as dedicated, focused reading, but it's good for sort of scanning a book in general and just getting the things in there. And sometimes if you're doing the dishes, I don't even know. I've been in there 2 hours cleaning the kitchen.
Yeah. That is a benefit. It's kind of like when I used to be a Spanish teacher, and I would sometimes just turn the Spanish on in the background. I'd sleep with the TV on in Spanish, or drive and I'd put Sirius XM on, Spanish channel. You just like absorb it subconsciously and osmosisly. And that's, you know, even if you're not 100% tuned in, you're still retaining a portion of that information.
Yeah, for sure. So everybody should check out your show. Like you said, it's got a couple different veins in it. And if they go to afightersmindset.libsyn.com, you'll go directly to it. Or you can just go to his website, and it's charliespaniard.com, and then you just click on the podcast link.
Yeah.
When you get guests, what are you looking for?
When I get guests? Is that what you said? Yeah. So
what kind of guests?
I've likened it to a dog sniffing a trail. So I'll randomly watch things that the number one priority is it interesting to me? Do I genuinely want to learn about that thing? And honest to goodness, I've had, you know, I had Scott Adams on the show a couple times. I had the original, these are ones that stick out. I had the original CEO of Ben and Jerry's, the guy, Chico Lager, who was with Ben and Jerry when they started the company. I've had, you know, fighters on, I've had authors on, I've had regular Joes who I think have an incredible story or really pique my interest. So it really and truly is across the board. I aim high, and sometimes I get rejected. Sometimes I don't get rejected, but I've had some of the coolest experiences. So my kids are 3 and 6, and there's a kid singer, kids music creator. Her name is Lori Berkner. My kids love her. Tremendous kids music. I had her on the show, and it's just a fun dynamic. Just because I'm such a curious person, and I just use that, to my advantage in creating a show that is about genuine curiosity and learning.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I book guests in a similar way where I try to, I just, oh, that's interesting. Let me get that person. Even if it's topical, I'm always trying to just, sort of find things that are in the zeitgeist that attract me. And I guess is sort of how I approach it.
Yeah. There was a documentary that I watched on Netflix or Prime. It's called Dealt. And it's about a card mechanic. He's blind. And it was such an awesome documentary. Dealt, D-E-A-L-T. Highly recommend everyone watches it. And I thought, I want to have him on my show. And so I just reached out cold, and he responded. We had like a tremendous episode, and it was like one of those experiences, like you said, I just come across random stuff and love it and want to talk to that person and reach out. And sometimes it works.
I saw in the notes that you won a season of Pros versus Joes. I want to ask you about this, though, because I watched that show, so I've surely seen you on TV.
Yeah.
How was that experience?
I'll tell you what, I was teaching Spanish at that time. So I wrestled in college, wrestled Division I, and was just diehard wrestler my whole life. And then that was over. And I was kind of what I refer to as fat and happy. I think that's common in the wrestling community. I was fat and happy. I was done wrestling. I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I was teaching Spanish. And I started to kind of like get an itch to compete again. And randomly I came across, I was coaching wrestling. And randomly I came across a flyer to become part of an email list for something. I had to get my contact information. And my thought is that was somehow passed on to someone else. I got this flyer to my parents' house where I was living at the time that said, like, do you have what it takes to take on the pros, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, screw it, I'm going to apply for this. Like, this would be fun. And I didn't think it was going anywhere. And then it was probably, I don't know, start to finish, but I'm going to say a 2-month-ish process of applying and filling out these crazy long documents. And eventually I was flown to, it was at the Home Depot Center in Carson, California.
Right.
And I recorded this. I was on reality. I was a junior high Spanish teacher. I took a week off and went out to California. I'm from Pennsylvania. Went out to California, got to compete against, I was on twice because I won my episode and then I went to the bonus. But Herschel Walker, Brandy Chastain, Justin Gatlin, Xavier McDaniel, Dominique Wilkins, Darren Dalton, Clyde Drexler, John Rocker, Goldberg, and Kevin Green.
Yeah.
They were the pros, and I won my episode and got called back for the finale and won the finale.
If I'm not mistaken, wasn't the finale, didn't that have a wrestling element in it where you had to, like, as you went through event to event, wasn't it like pushing Couture out of the ring or something like that? Or?
Season 1 did not. I was on season 1. That was season 2 or 3. See, they had Couture, and then Kurt Angle, I believe, was also on one of the seasons. A funny story about that, though. Goldberg, WCW wrestler. I don't know if he's ever in WWE, but he played for the Falcons. I didn't know that, but he played in the NFL, and I played 1 yard line basically with him and Kevin Green. And during the intros on one of the takes, it's the episodes are on Amazon. I don't know if you'd ever want to watch them, but they're on Amazon for $2. But I said something like, Goldberg, I just want to tell you that you're lucky we don't have to wrestle because something. Yeah. And he freaking scared the daylights out of me because he like laid into me and like really put me in my place. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was just like trying to be witty for the camera. And then afterwards he was cool about it. I apologized. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And he was, he was like, oh, it's just whatever. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But I was legitimately scared.
You guys had to cover like Jerry Rice in that thing, right? Like,
I didn't have Jerry Rice, but yes, Jerry Rice had to be covered as well. I had to try to tackle Herschel Walker. So they sent him down the sidelines, and I started at an angle, and I had to like try to tackle him, knock him out of bounds.
Yeah,
it didn't happen.
Yeah, One of the funniest things about that whole thing, and I don't know where you were in this thing, was it was an event in the pool, and you had to, I think, swim like 50 yards or 100 meters. I don't think it was even 100. It wasn't very far. And there were the three of you on the deck, and you got to pick the person you swam against. On the deck is Misty May, who is a professional beach volleyball player, someone who clearly is comfortable around the water. Kevin Green, who is a defensive end or a linebacker, depending on which way you want to look at it, and a 6'7" black man named Xavier McDaniel. And whoever, and I don't know which one you were, but one of them said, "I'll take Misty May." Like, why would you ever pick her first? We have these two giants who clearly are not going to be fast in the pool.
Yeah, there were all kinds of situations like that. I remember I played punt, pass, and kick with Dominique Wilkins, and I mean, he's like 8 feet tall and skinny as a rail. And it was just a crazy being put in those differences, because these guys and girls are masters of their sport, but it wasn't always just their sport. It was another sport as well. So I had to wrestle John Rocker off the mound, and he's a big dude. He's a really big dude. And I got him out, but I mean, it was kind of luck that I got him out. And then we had to try to hit off of them. It was cool, man. It was a fun experience. That they were awesome to us as well. That was the coolest thing, is they were so nice to us, and they understood that we were like total fans and they were superstars, and they gave us the time of day. It was really neat. And that experience prompted me to start fighting, because
did it really?
I was there. It was a big opportunity. My wrestling career had been such that I generally fell short of big opportunities. I was more mature. I was a little bit older. I trained harder. Back to the preparation thing. I knew, like, looking at my opponents, I trained harder than you. I felt like I was better. And then I won it on national TV in the spotlight. And I thought, oh, man, I got to do something with this now. Like I have this thing now that I've got to harness. And from there, it kind of led to fighting.
Yeah. You went from Joe to pro.
Yeah. Yeah. That was all. People ask that often, but when I was on that show, Purrs versus Joe's, and I wore a bandana too. I had big poofy hair. I had a ponytail at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, fighting was not even in my radar, not even anywhere near my life. And then after that, that's when I was like, I'd like to do this thing.
Yeah. What a fun conversation. Did you have to do the swimming event, or was that not part of your episode?
No, that wasn't part of mine. The people were the same. So I don't know if that was I feel like that would have been the same season, but that might have been the other individual episode that they did. And then they brought some of those pros back for the finale, and we did different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's just hilarious. Like, if you stood me on a deck, I'd be like, I get to pick any of these guys to swim against, and I'm supposed to win. I'll take Xavier McDaniel. There's no way that guy's going to outswim me. There's just no way. It's hard to swim when you're that tall, and you're not a swimmer.
And you're not a swimmer. It's hard to swim, period, for anybody, especially when you're that big. But I had to rebound against Xavier McDaniel. And it was like, come on, are you serious? The guy was 300 pounds.
Yeah. He could stick his butt out, and you would be like 10 feet from the basket.
Literally, it was like he was just flipping a gnat away from him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I'll let you ask me a question, and then we'll wrap it up.
I just appreciate being here. What brought you to podcasting?
When I got back from doing combat, I was tired of all the threat and danger stuff, and I wanted to do something that was more aligned to what I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be on radio or TV, be a sports announcer, that kind of thing. And this provided the path that most interested me. So I got the chance to take my spy skills in talking to people and asking interviews, that kind of thing, and then and then telling everybody what I think it means. So it just provided a nice transitional way to take my existing skills and put them to work, and it's stuck. We put 5 shows out a week. They're an hour each, and above 700 plus shows. So we've been at it for a while now. Wow, that's impressive. Yeah. I put out daily shows too, but it takes time to read, but an hour show 5 days a week, that's intense. And when you're looking for a guest, what's your radar? Your guest getting radar or process? Different guests, different things. Sometimes I want a guest on because they're a friend of mine or a family member, and someone I'm just like, because I get to do what I want to do, So I'll share part of their story, their life. So there's those kind. There are people that have been on the show before that I just enjoy, like Jim DeFelice has written several books during the life of the show. And so whenever he writes a book, he comes on the show and we talk. And sometimes he brings guests on. And that's where I got uncomfortable. I'm like, I'm going to let somebody else book people and bring them in. So there's guests who bring on guests and they produce an episode with me. But also there's ones that that drive revenue, that are really powerful on social media. There's different reasons. And because we do 5 a week, my editorial decisions get to be pretty broad because we don't have to stick in one tiny little spot. We get to explore. So what I like to say is we illustrate life, because life is, it's the everything spice in a jar,
Yeah. I like it, man.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on. Everybody should definitely go check out your website, charliespaniard.com. And if you guys have any questions, I'll have all that stuff in the show notes, and then reach out. He's available. He's on social media, and he'll talk to you.
Well, I appreciate it. My social media handle is @CharlieSpaniard, and I've written 2 books. Those are both available on Amazon. The Spaniard Show on iTunes. And like I was saying earlier, I am hard at work creating valuable products that will be up and available soon. So I appreciate any and all support.
The books will be in the show notes, so you guys check them out. If you like Charlie, support him. Click, subscribe, rate, and review. You know the deal. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.